Dr. El-Sayed, nice to have you back on our overtime segment. Lauren's got a question, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, so I was curious, especially curious about your comment related to appealing to disaffected young men. And the trends in young men and women have diverged pretty sharply. Young men have gone pretty Republican. Young women have gone reliably Democratic the last several cycles in Gen Z. So how do you appeal to the disaffected young men while keeping the women who have reliably voted Democratic?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you this. As usual, the women got it right. I think there is a conversation here to be had, which is about trying to bring people together. And I try to understand where young men in this generation just below me have gone a certain way, because young men in my generation were reliably progressive. And I think part of it has to do with a certain level of like online culture. I think part of it has to do with a certain level of just frustration at the nihilism of this moment. And then I think part of it has to do with the way that it is just easy to get swayed toward this idea that all masculinity is toxic. I'm a father of 2 daughters, right? I got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. And as I think about it, the question I'm asking is, how do we lead for this up-and-coming generation in a way where folks don't have to feel like they hate each other or they're against each other or that they can't come together around something that's bigger? And so my point is about that idea of unity, about the things that we all want together, about the notion that there is not a zero-sum politics, that when women are making strides in higher education and the workforce, that doesn't come at the cost of somebody else, that that's actually a better society, and that I want my daughters to grow up knowing that when they succeed and when they go out and do great things, that the men in their lives and in our society are going to embrace them and empower them in doing it. And so I think it's a conversation with men that's about coming back to the set of ideals that we should have been about in the first place. And part of that, I think, is like, what does it look like to build a benevolent masculinity, right? That being masculine doesn't have to mean that you're constantly punching down or punching at somebody else or bringing a certain level of like just sneering and cynicism at everything. But that there is a world in which you can embrace being a masculine guy, but that also means empowering people in your life. And so I actually think that this is the kind of message that both men and women are looking for. People don't want to hate each other. They just don't. Like I've lived in my life with my name, and you can imagine I've taken my fair share of questions and frankly straight up hate. But I also know that when you smile at somebody and you say, hey, look, like, what are we going to find the thing that we agree on? That it generally makes you feel better and it makes the other person feel better. And so I don't think that you have to play to this notion that folks can't get along, but actually you have to play to the things that unify us and the things that we all want.
Dr. Grade the job that Secretary Kennedy, the man that President Trump has picked to lead the health department in this country so far.
I'll give him a D.
Why?
Why not an F? Is his middle initial. Look, I actually think that he is, to his credit, he has brought attention to a set of problems that we have been trying to bring attention to for a very long time. Nutrition in this country is atrocious, in large part because it's been dominated by huge corporations. We subsidize the growing and the production of the wrong kinds of foods, and then that's what we end up eating. And it's all ultra-processed and delivered in ways that get us to just want to consume more. He's brought attention to that. The problem I have with RFK, like the problem I have with Donald Trump, is that he identifies the problem and then brings the wrong solution, chaotically and ham-fistedly executed, usually for his own gain. And that's why I take him from a potential A for identifying the problems to a D. And the last thing I'll say is this. The notion that you cannot forthrightly and directly state that the MMR vaccine is clearly safe and clearly effective in the midst of the worst measles outbreak we've had in generations is a real problem. The notion that you want to take fluoride out of our water without thinking about what the long-term consequences will be for the lowest income people in rural areas or urban areas in terms of cavities and the impact that that's going to have on their development. The notion that your solution to fixing our nutrition problem is banning one red dye rather than actually taking on the corporations that have hijacked our nutrition system for their gain, that just seems to me like you don't understand the problem, even if you've correctly identified it.
So in the broadcast part of the show, you talked about not taking money from corporate PACs. As a practical matter, if you get to the final third or quarter of the campaign, you're 2 or 3 points apart, which is significant but not impossible, and one or more corporate PAC directors came to you and said, you know what, we like a lot of what you're saying, maybe not everything, but a lot of it, and we're going to write you a check. What do you say to them?
No thanks. I appreciate you, but no thanks. And also,
would you reject a check that if it were sent into you?
I would send it back. And I just tell you, look, the notion that I get to that point in the campaign and there are corporate PAC directors who are like, we really like what you're saying, I probably haven't done my job well. Because look, my entire thesis here is that we need an economy that works for working people. And the problem with it is that in this country, I'm a capitalist, right? I believe deeply in small business. I'm just not a corporatist. And the reason that our economy feels like it's so hard to survive in is because we've created a system where corporations do 2 things. They are unaccountable either to their workers or, frankly, to their customers, but they're accountable to a quarterly bottom line through a process of financialization, which means that they're more interested in what some stockbroker on Wall Street thinks about how profitable they'll be relative to the rest of the economy in 3 months. That divorces you from a local community, divorces you from your workers, and so you watch them make terrible decisions. And it's not that I don't believe in business. I just believe in business that's owned by real people who have to look their workers in the eye and spend their money that they make back in their local community. So I want this to be the best possible place to build a small business. And the number one challenge to building a small business is that the incumbents, the huge corporations that tend to dominate our economy, make it a lot harder for you to jump in. So if we're serious about this project of capitalism, then we've got to be serious about making this a place where small businesses thrive. And the worst part about it all is then they come with their corporate PAC checks to the politicians and say, hey, listen, we're going to help you get elected. You're 2 to 3 points down. We can help you. And then when you get elected, guess what happens? The lobbyist comes up and says, hey, didn't you love that check that you got from DTE or Blue Cross, right? And now we got some public policy we'd like you to move for us. I just don't want to be in the business of being thought of as somebody who's going to move that policy. I just won't.
Doc, put your strategy hat on for just a second. Would you concede that the top of the ticket in this race next time out will be very important to your future in getting votes? Do you agree with that premise?
I do.
So in light of that, it must be important in your mind as to who is that gubernatorial candidate. Why are you smiling?
Tim, I see where you're going here.
You figured this out? That I don't have to finish the question.
I got a lot of respect for folks running for governor. I want to see that race play out. I think at the end of the day, frankly, the top of the ticket is the race that makes the most noise. My job is to make sure that the Senate race is the top of the ticket, and that's going to be the focus for us.
Well, but wait a second, it's not, okay?
It's at the top.
Well, but
it's near the top.
If you have a loser at the top of the ticket from your party, you could be in trouble. Would you concede that point?
Yeah, no, I mean, factually, you are correct about that point.
And so why wouldn't you say, here's my person, because this person can help me?
Well, because at the end of the day, I want to see the race play out. Second, again, I've got a lot of respect for both Secretary of State Benson and Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. I've gotten to work with both of them pretty closely in both of my past jobs. I've really appreciated the perspective that they bring to their work. I want to let them run their campaigns, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Are you saying as a practical matter that it's between those two, that other candidates in the race won't?
We'll see. I don't know Sheriff Swanson as well,
right.
And certainly with Mayor Duggan running as an independent, that's going to change the race in ways I think all of us have tried to think through, but get really complicated really quick.
To his advantage?
I'm not sure. I don't know to whose advantage it is, to be honest. And just as a matter of trying to think through that, I don't think it's been tested. I understand what his frustrations are with the two-party system, and frankly, I share some of them. That we sometimes can't get out of certain molds because of the D and the R. But at the same time, I also wonder, okay, so why not do the hard work of trying to move your party in the direction you think it should move? And as someone who's had very clear differences of opinion with a lot of leaders in my party, I'm not leaving the party. What I'm trying to do is move the party in the direction that I think is closer to the party's ideals, and I would like to see folks do that work.
Let's put a ribbon on this, but quickly, has anybody from the party come to you and said, please don't run?
No. I think people understand that the attempt to try and fix who is going to be the nominee has backfired enough. I think right now, this is a moment where the Democratic Party is still searching for where it's going to go. I think even if some folks don't agree with the direction I think it should go, I think they recognize that there are a lot of people who agree with me about this being a party that should be about working people. If you show up to work tomorrow, life should be easier for you than it is right now, and that this should be a party of peace and justice. And so I think we've got an opportunity to have the conversation with voters and let them choose, because at the end of the day, you got to win elections. And if you were able to do this work of persuasion, remember, like, democracy is about persuading people that you're the best choice, your vision is the right vision. And if you don't have the conversation about vision, then don't expect people to follow you at the end of the day. And so I think this is a moment where folks are starting to step back and realize, right, actually, we should have this debate. We should have this conversation, right? Let's see what happens and comes at the end of it. And if that looks like me, fantastic. And if it looks like someone else, then look, let's follow forward. What's critical right now is that Democrats cannot lose a seat. I think everybody understands that Democrats cannot lose this Senate seat, right? We have to win it. But here's the thing. I played sports growing up. There's a difference when you're playing not to lose versus you're playing to win, right? I've lost an election before, right? I know what that's like. And to me, I know what I'm fighting for. I know who I'm fighting for, right? And so we're playing to win. We're going to have our conversations with folks across the state. My job is to understand their pain, and in the same way I learned how to do when I was training as a doctor, to ask what's wrong and then try to work together to fix it. That's what this work is about. So let's have that conversation.
Doc, thanks for showing up.
Thank you for having me. It was always a privilege, and thank you again.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.